There are moments in football where something happens and you genuinely have to stop and read the news twice just to make sure you understood it correctly. This is one of those moments. A player receives a red card in a World Cup knockout match. The rules state clearly, in a circular distributed to every single participating federation months before the tournament began, that a red card means an automatic one-match suspension. No appeal process, no gray area, automatic. Every team in this World Cup was told the same thing before a single ball was kicked. And then, less than 96 hours later, that suspension was gone. The player was cleared to play. Belgium, the federation set to face that player in the very next match, found out through media reports rather than any official communication from the organization that governs the sport. This is the story of what happened with Balogun, the United States striker, his red card against Bosnia and Herzegovina, FIFA's extraordinary reversal, the phone call from the President of the United States that sat behind it, and why Belgium's response sent shockwaves through the entire football world, shockwaves that are still being felt after the final whistle blew. Let's start with the incident itself, because understanding the original red card is essential to understanding everything that came after. In the 64th minute of the United States versus Bosnia and Herzegovina in the round of 32, Balogun and Bosnian defender Tarek Muhramovic were both challenging for the ball, the kind of physical contest that happens dozens of times in every single football match at this level. The referee on the field, watching the action in real time, didn't consider the contact worthy of a card at all. No whistle. Play continued. Then VAR intervened. The video review official examined the footage and sent the referee to the monitor, and in slow motion you could see Balogun's foot land on the back of Muhramovic's ankle as they both went for the ball. Here's where things get interesting from a refereeing perspective, because experts in the game were divided almost immediately. Multiple referee analysts pointed out that VAR protocol specifically states that slow-motion footage should not be used to evaluate the severity of contact for red card decisions, because slow motion distorts the apparent speed and force of a challenge in ways that can be deeply misleading. What looked deliberate at quarter speed looked accidental at normal speed. Balogun himself was clear that he had no intention of fouling his opponent. Pochettino, the United States coach, was clear that in his view it was never a red card. But the card stood. Balogun was sent off, and the United States, who won the match regardless, knew they were heading into a round of 16 match against Belgium without their leading scorer of the tournament, a player who had contributed goals across the group stage and the round of 32, and who represented one of the most dangerous offensive weapons in the American squad. That should have been where the story ended, in footballing terms. Controversial red card, harsh, but within the scope of VAR decisions that referees had made throughout this tournament. Players suspended for the next match. Life goes on. The rules were the rules. And every federation in this competition had been told exactly what those rules were. But then something happened that nobody in this tournament expected. FIFA's disciplinary committee announced, on the Sunday before Monday's match, that Balogun's automatic one-match ban was being suspended under Article 27 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code, replaced with a probationary period of 1 year. The player was eligible to play against Belgium. The suspension, which had been described as automatic and non-appealable, was gone. FIFA's statement cited Article 27, which gives judicial bodies the power to fully or partially suspend the implementation of a disciplinary sanction. The probationary condition attached meant that if Balogun committed another infringement of similar nature and gravity during the 1-year period, the original suspension would be immediately enforced alongside any new penalty. Now here is the piece that turned a footballing controversy into a global story. This reversal did not happen in a vacuum. Reporting confirmed that President Donald Trump had personally called FIFA President Gianni Infantino the week before, asking him to review the red card and the suspension that came with it. Trump later confirmed the call himself, telling reporters he didn't think the challenge was a foul and that he didn't know what the hell a red card was. He posted on social media afterward, thanking FIFA for reversing a great injustice. U.S. officials, including the Commerce Secretary and the Executive Director of the White House's World Cup Task Force, were reported to have helped coordinate the push, recruiting lawyers and communicating with U.S. Soccer as the case was made to FIFA. Infantino, for his part, confirmed the call had happened, but insisted FIFA's judicial bodies acted independently, applying the disciplinary code to the facts in front of them, and that this independence was essential to the sport's credibility. Believe that explanation or not, the optics were impossible to ignore. A sitting head of state had called the president of World Football's governing body, and days later, a rule described in writing as automatic and non-appealable no longer applied to the player at the center of the call. Now let's go through why Belgium's response was so forceful, because the Royal Belgian Football Association didn't just disagree with the decision. They built a legal and procedural case against it that is meticulously documented and extremely difficult to dismiss. Their first argument was the clearest. Article 66.4 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code states explicitly that a red card automatically results in a suspension for the team's next match. Article 10.5 of the FIFA World Cup 2026 competition regulations repeats this in even more specific terms for this tournament, and Circular Number 16, distributed to every participating federation back in May, reaffirmed it again. The RBFA pointed out that these rules had been applied consistently to every single red card issued in this World Cup before this moment. Every other player sent off in this tournament served their automatic one-match ban. No exception was made for anyone else. Belgium asked a straightforward question. Why was this case different from every other case that came before it? Their second argument was procedural, and this is where Belgium's statement became particularly striking. The RBFA did not learn of FIFA's decision through official communication from FIFA. They learned about it through media reports. Think about that for a moment. A federation directly affected by the decision, whose upcoming match was fundamentally altered by it, whose ability to prepare depended on knowing which players they would be facing, had to find out through journalists rather than through the organization that made the ruling. When Belgium sent a letter to FIFA requesting a copy of the decision, an explanation of the process that had been followed, and setting out their position on the applicable regulations, the response they received was extraordinary in its own right. FIFA replied that Belgium's letter constituted an appeal, that a judge had been appointed, and that the RBFA had only a few hours to complete that appeal process. No information about the actual decision was provided. No explanation of the reasoning. No copy of the ruling. Just a deadline, and a notification that the clock was already running. The third element of Belgium's statement was perhaps the most damaging in terms of what it reveals about how this situation was handled. At every match coordination meeting throughout this World Cup, one of the standard sections of FIFA's presentation covered the automatic suspension of players who receive red cards. Belgium confirmed this section had been included at every meeting before their previous matches in this tournament. The meeting before the United States game had that section removed. When Belgium asked FIFA, both verbally and in writing, why that section had been taken out, they received no response. Belgium's coach, Rudy Garcia, didn't hold back when he faced journalists. He said he hadn't realized that at the World Cup, the 5th of July was actually the 1st of April, calling it an April Fool's joke. He said Belgium weren't defending just their own federation or their national team, they were defending football, its ethics, and its integrity. That's a significant statement from a head coach hours before a knockout match. It reflects how seriously the Belgian football community viewed what had happened. UEFA went even further. Europe's governing body issued a statement saying the decision crossed a red line. They said football relies on rules as the basis for fair, honest, and transparent competition, and that in this case the rules were not open to interpretation. When the certainty of rules is no longer guaranteed by its guardians, they said, the integrity of the game is at stake and the credibility of a competition is undermined. They described their reaction as disbelief at an unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable decision. Here's the bigger picture this situation opens up, because the Balogun case doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not the first time Article 27 has been used to clear a major player from a suspension that would otherwise have kept them out of significant matches. Cristiano Ronaldo received a red card in a World Cup qualifier the previous November. The FIFA Disciplinary Committee later reduced that ban through the same probationary mechanism, keeping Ronaldo eligible for Portugal's World Cup group stage matches. That decision attracted some attention at the time, but it was processed relatively quietly because it occurred before the tournament began. Balogun's situation was different in one crucial respect. The original red card came inside the tournament itself, in a knockout round match, with his eligibility for the very next game directly at stake. The decision to clear him was made and announced the day before that next game. Belgium had minimal time to adjust their preparation. The reversal happened in a compressed time frame that made it impossible for the process to feel anything other than rushed, and it happened, by all reported accounts, after a direct call from the President of the United States to FIFA's president. Think about what this means for the sporting logic of the World Cup going forward. If Article 27 can be used to suspend an automatic one-match ban that the tournament's own regulations describe as non-appealable, then what does automatic actually mean in this competition? What certainty do teams have about the disciplinary consequences facing their opponents? If a red card in a knockout match can be cleared under probationary conditions less than 24 hours before the next game, following a phone call from a head of state, how does any federation plan around the disciplinary situation of their upcoming opponent, and how does the sport explain that away as routine? Belgium's statement was explicit about this uncertainty. As of the moment they released it, they said they had still not received any decision or explanation from FIFA regarding the matter. They had no alternative but to formally challenge the players' eligibility for the upcoming match. On the day of the game itself, Belgium's appeal was heard and rejected, with FIFA stating that the chairperson of its appeal committee had not been involved in that decision. The RBFA said afterward it was astonished by the outcome and that it still had not received the grounds for the ruling, a copy of the decision, the motivation for declaring the player eligible, or even the referee's report. Belgium committed to continuing the fight in the days and months ahead, in defense of what they called the fundamental principles of ethics, fair competition, and the interests of football as a whole. From a purely footballing perspective, the impact on the match itself was significant. Balogun had been the United States' most dangerous forward in the knockout rounds, his movement in behind defenses and his ability to finish with both feet giving Pochettino's side a dimension that was harder to replace than most forwards of his profile. Belgium had spent the days between the Bosnia match and their round of 16 fixture preparing for a United States side without him. The reversal of that suspension meant that preparation had to be partially discarded within hours of kickoff. Rudy Garcia made clear the timing bothered him as much as the substance of the decision. His team found out through media reports. They had a matter of hours to process the information and adjust their tactical approach before one of the biggest matches of their World Cup campaign. That's not a hypothetical inconvenience. That's a concrete sporting disadvantage created by the way the process was handled, independent of whether the underlying decision itself was right or wrong. And then the match was played. Balogun took the field for the United States in Seattle. Belgium won 4-1, eliminating the United States from the tournament they were co-hosting, and with that result, all three host nations, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, were out of their own World Cup. U.S. Soccer, for its part, issued a brief statement after the ruling saying simply that it accepted the disciplinary committee's decision and was pleased Balogun was eligible to compete, with its full attention on the match ahead. Balogun himself said nothing publicly in the hours before kickoff, though he posted a photo of himself in front of the fans on social media. This matters because the credibility of a World Cup rests, more than anything else, on the perception that the rules apply equally to every team. When one federation believes, with documented evidence to support that belief, that a process was followed that treated them differently than it would have treated any other team in the same position, and when that process appears to trace back to a phone call from a head of state to the sport's own president, the tournament's integrity stops being a given and becomes a question. Belgium's statement was careful to say that regardless of the sporting outcome of the match, they were deeply saddened by the course of events. That phrase, regardless of the sporting outcome, tells you exactly how seriously they viewed the principle at stake, and in the end, they won the match anyway. So the questions this leaves behind are bigger than one red card. Does FIFA's use of Article 27 in this situation undermine the credibility of the World Cup's disciplinary process, or was it a legitimate application of a rule that exists for exactly this kind of borderline decision? Should a phone call from any head of state, to any football federation, be able to move a disciplinary outcome at all? Can Belgium's formal challenge, which they've committed to pursuing in the coming months, actually produce meaningful change in how FIFA handles disciplinary decisions at future tournaments? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the coverage of everything that follows.